Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are standing in the middle of an ancient river basin, watching the mist coil up from the earth like it has secrets to tell. The air smells of wet stone and crushed fern, and something just moved, massive but gentle. You can't see it at first, not really. Just the silhouette. A tower of neck drifting above the trees. Its footsteps leave craters in the ground, each the size of a bathtub. You blink, and then it's closer, and closer. And somehow, it walks like it's wearing stilts, front legs rising before the rear ones catch up like a giraffe trying out yoga. You probably won't survive. If the sheer weight of this thing doesn't crush your bones, the weirdness of it might. Evolution didn't make this creature for your comfort. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far off, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I'd love to know who else is wandering this dusty timeline with me. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. The marsh is quiet until it isn't. A vibration hums in your chest long before the sound reaches your ears. It isn't thunder, it's steps. Rhythmic, too slow for a predator. Too heavy for anything that lives now. And then it emerges, long neck swaying, head lurching like it's trying to remember something, and limbs that move in a gait you recognize because you've seen it in a giraffe. 1-2, 1-2, front before back, deliberate, surreal. This isn't an illusion. This is Xenotitan longistylis. A sauropod so odd that paleontologists still argue whether it even qualifies as one. It walks like it's balancing a plate of water on its head. Each step seems a decision, like gravity is optional. You try to keep up, but the thing doesn't walk in straight lines. It spirals, winding through copses of tall conifers. Its movement is hypnotic. There's nothing frantic, nothing urgent, just pure geometry in motion. A breeze picks up, and with it the smell of age. This isn't the jungle you imagine from dinosaur movies. This is dry season forest, scrubby, sun-bleached with thin canopy cover and lots of open space. The kind of place where the tallest animals would thrive. You step over the hardened scales of a shed skin, another creature's, not the giant's. The landscape here is a mosaic of bones, plants, and footprints that look like someone dropped a cathedral onto soft earth. Your pace quickens as you circle back ahead of it. You climb a low ridge and look down. It's joined by two more, all walking in that same giraffe-style rhythm. It's oddly moving to watch, like a ballet choreographed by physics. You count their vertebrae as they sway past. 18 neck vertebrae. No animal alive today even comes close. A modern giraffe only has 7, but you're not here to compare. You're here to witness something that was never supposed to walk like this. One of them lets out a call, deep and brief, like someone blowing across a jug of molasses. Your bones buzz again. You drop to the grass. If they notice you, they don't care. Either you're too small to matter or too soft to threaten. Probably both. The front limbs, they're what stick with you. Taller than the back ones and more rigid. Almost columnar, like stilts planted into the crust of the earth. You wonder how it even lies down, if it can lie down. Historians still debate whether these sauropods ever truly rested on the ground or simply leaned against tree clusters like living architecture. Imagine trying to fold a bridge in half just to take a nap. You hear a splash. One of them has entered a shallow oxbow lake, stepping with comical care. The water barely touches its knees. It pauses mid-step, then drinks. Its neck lowers in segments like an unfolding fire escape, and the head finally dips lips. Puckering, slurping like a vacuum cleaner on gravel. Then it raises up, neck reaccordiating, and water spills from its jaws like a fountain. A dragonfly the size of your hand lands on your wrist. You flinch. The insects here are aggressive, oversized, and kind of judgy, but you ignore it. You're still thinking about that walk. No modern quadruped uses that gait except giraffes, and they're not even close relatives. That's convergent evolution for you, different species finding the same solution to the same weird problem. Reach higher, walk taller, stretch further. But here's the twist. Unlike giraffes, this dinosaur doesn't have hooves. Its front feet have a thumb claw vestigial, but still present. Its hands are built like stacked stone. If it punches the earth stays punched. Yet somehow it walks with a floaty elegance like it's afraid of bruising the planet. A mosquito lands on your ear. You slap it and miss. Another joke from nature, you're surrounded by giants that don't care about you, but it's the bugs that'll drive you mad. As the sun dips behind a crag of petrified wood, the sauropods begin to form a loose pier. Not a herd exactly, but a formation. They rotate around each other like clock hands around a broken dial. You sit on a rock, legs aching, and realize you've been shadowing them for hours. And yet they've barely traveled a few kilometers. There's no hurry, no fear, just movement. One pauses and lifts its head. It looks toward you, or maybe just past you. Its eyes placed more to the side than you expected seem unreadable. You hold your breath, and then it moves on. By the time darkness folds over the plain, they're silhouettes again. Living parentheses in the long sentence of time. You lie down watching the stars appear. You can still hear them walking. Soft thuds, clockwork limbs. And you wonder, did it feel as strange back then as it looks now? You wake to the sound of something cracking, a low groaning split like a tree giving up its last grip on life. But it's not a tree. It's the shifting bones of the giraffe-limbed dinosaur stretching itself under the pinkish dawn. You blink grit from your eyes. One of them, perhaps the same one from last night, is rotating its massive shoulders, front legs lifting first in that eerie, regal motion that still feels incorrect. No animal should walk like this, and yet here it is. Its front limbs are longer than the back by a lot. Think walking on stilts while wearing sandals behind them. Most animals you know, from lizards to lions, either balance evenly or put more power in the rear legs for propulsion. But not this creature. Its name doesn't roll off the tongue, Xenotaton longistylus, but its form doesn't ask for your approval. It evolved this way for a reason. We just haven't agreed on which reason yet. Paleontologists still debate whether those long front legs were an adaptation for feeding thermoregulation, or even some kind of mating display. Yeah, imagine using weird legs to impress a mate. Oh wait, have you seen flamingos? You shuffle through the underbrush trying to keep pace. The way it moves is hypnotic. Front left, rear, left front right, rear, right. Each limb arching high before descending in a slow, deliberate stomp. Not dragging, not marching, more like dancing in slow motion through molasses. You try mimicking the movement and nearly fall into a patch of cycads. The ancient plants rattle against your clothes as you steady yourself. Okay, so it's not a motion meant for the squishy two-legged crowd, but it is efficient. It shifts weight slowly, never overexerting, never jolting forward. You realize this thing isn't built for speed. It's built for height reach and maybe just maybe style. You approach one as it browses its neck, weaving like a living crane arm through the uppermost branches of an ancient tree. Its head is narrow, almost comically small compared to the rest of its body. The nostrils are high on the snout, the eyes placed wide like a side-view mirror. Its mouth snips off foliage delicately like someone trimming a bonsai tree. The chewing, though, is another story. Slow grinding and a bit disgusting, but hey, that's 100 tons of herbivore for you. It doesn't just eat, it curates its meals, head weaving between treetops that other dinosaurs can only dream about. And the neck. Good grief, the neck. It isn't just long, it's elastic. Watching it bend backward and sideways makes your own vertebrae tingle. If you had that kind of mobility, you'd never need to turn around again. Just rotate and grab the TV remote with your teeth. But that's the genius of this build. With legs like stilts and a neck like a hosepipe, it can reach food others can't. In a prehistoric arms race for altitude, this creature didn't just bring a ladder, it was the ladder. Still, that front leg dominance raises more questions than it answers. Why grow disproportionately tall limbs when evolution loves symmetry? A few theories float around. One posits that long front limbs allowed better leverage for the neck, reducing muscular strain and stabilizing posture. Another suggests it helped in displaying dominance. Standing taller than other sauropods might signal strength. Yet another theory. Maybe this just happened by accident and stuck around because it did not work. A breeze passes ruffling its scaly hide. The skin isn't smooth, it's like cracked leather with shallow patterns of plates and wrinkles. A few birds, yes, proto-birds, hop around on its back like tourists on a whale-watching cruise. It doesn't notice or care. You watch the toes next. Each foot looks like a giant's fist pressed into dough. The front feet lack claws except for that single thumb spike, useless now, but maybe once a vestigial weapon or a grooming tool. You think about your own toes. You wiggle them. Somehow you feel under-evolved. Then it lifts its front foot again. The shoulder rises, rotating like a slow-moving gear. The body tilts forward and the rear leg follows. That strange giraffe-like walk resumes. Only now do you see how the spine arches slightly, counterbalancing the odd limb ratio. It walks like a suspension bridge that learned how to saunter. You hear a chuckle behind you, your own. Because honestly, if this thing existed today, it'd be memed within minutes. When you skip leg day, but only in the back. Or front legs in Paris, back legs still in Monday. But then you quiet down. Because the lights shifted and for a moment everything turns golden. The trees, the height of the dinosaur, the air itself. And in that light the creature doesn't look odd. It looks perfect. Like this whole world evolved around it, not the other way around. Then one of the juveniles sneezes a thick, wet sound, and you're reminded even legends have sinus problems. You walk for hours beside it, mapping its gait. You realize the trackways paleontologists found, those evenly spaced, widely placed impressions, weren't accidents. They weren't left by multiple creatures walking in line. They were this. One creature, 4 legs walking in a rhythm we still don't fully understand. Like Morse code, but for paleontologists. At dusk, you find a fossilized trackway. It's perfect, each pad impression preserved like it just stepped through despite being millions of years old. You step beside it, placing your boot next to a front footprint. You barely feel the curve of the toe. The sun dips. The creature fades into the dusk. And you're left standing in its footprints, wondering how something so bizarre could also be so elegant. You've been trailing the tall walking sauropod for days now, and a pattern's emerging. It's not just what it eats or how it drinks, though we'll come back to that, but how it handles danger. Or more accurately, how poorly it handles it. Because this dinosaur, for all its elegance and towering grace, is absolutely terrible at running. You don't notice it at first. After all, it seems so calm, so unbothered, like the universe rotates around its head. But then a pack of raptors, or something similar enough to earn the name, bursts from the scrub and everything changes. The sauropod tries to flee. That's when the illusion breaks. It lifts its front leg slowly, like it's double-checking whether the ground's still there. The back legs follow, but too quickly, causing the body to lurch forward like a shopping cart with one wheel stuck. The front limbs slam down again, sending up a puff of dust, and the back ones scuttle along trying to keep pace. You're witnessing what can only be described as a graceful stumble. Other dinosaurs, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, would be halfway to another county by now. But your long-limbed friend is moving like it's late to a slow-motion parade. You want to cheer it on, maybe yell, "Come on, you glorious giraffe lizard, show them what you've got," but all it's got is altitude and hope. You dive into a gully, heart pounding. The predators ignore you. Too small. They're more interested in a juvenile, perhaps something between manageable and meaty. But the herd's formation changes. Three adults reposition, placing themselves between the young and the danger. They don't charge, they stand. That's their defense walls of bone and muscle, rooted like trees that grew legs. One of them swings its neck, not fast, not with force, just meaningfully. A warning, a threat. Hard to say. The raptors pause. The adults keep staring. You can't tell who's winning this stare down, but you're suddenly aware that those raptors have better odds chasing anything else. Then they vanish as fast as they came. A test, maybe. Or a lesson. Either way, the sauropods resume their march like nothing happened. You, on the other hand, are still crouched behind a rock, reevaluating everything you thought you knew about bravery and bad knees. The thing is, evolution doesn't care about coolness. It cares about survival. And for all their awkward escape mechanics, these dinosaurs clearly made it work. For millions of years. Somehow, despite being slow, despite being awkward, despite looking like they were built from spare giraffe parts, they thrived. Some scientists suggest that this giraffe-like gait actually helped them avoid sprinting. They reached food few others could. They stuck together. Their size alone deterred attacks. Think of it like carrying around a "Do Not Disturb" sign made of solid mass and social unity. You press your hand into one of the deeper footprints it leaves behind. The impression is wide-splayed, slightly outward. It's not a runner's foot, it's the foot of something that plants itself and waits for the world to come to it. A quiet reminder that not all greatness charges forward. Some of it stands still and grows enormous. As you walk beside one of the juveniles, a lanky thing still figuring out how not to trip over its own shadow, you notice it practicing. Yes, practicing. It sprints in short bursts, front legs clumsily trying to synchronize with the shorter, springier rear ones. The result is part ballet, part tumble, like watching a deer try to rollerblade. Its parent watches silently, or maybe it's just chewing. Further back, the herd crosses an open plain. It's a flat stretch of sediment littered with broken shells from long-dead freshwater clams. You see a few smaller dinosaurs darting through bipedal quick nervy. Compared to the sauropods, they look like sparrows heckling an elephant. One gets too close. The sauropod pauses, shifts slightly, and lets a massive puff of breath out through its nostrils. The smaller dinosaur freezes, considers its life choices, and promptly disappears into the underbrush. They don't need to run well. They just need to remind others that they're always watching. Later that evening, you climb a rise and look down at the shallow valley below. You can see the herd's path lines of footprints and crushed vegetation weaving like trails through a snowfield. You imagine that moment millions of years later, when some fossil hunter stumbles upon those prints trying to understand the creature that made them. And they'll wonder too why it walked like that. Why it didn't run better. Why it looked like an architectural mistake. And yet it lived. And that's the part everyone forgets. You take out your sketch pad, yes, you brought one because what kind of time traveler doesn't journal, and you start drawing. Not just the dinosaur, the motion, that odd front leg, rear leg rhythm, a kinetic loop that feels too slow to escape, too smooth to fight, but exactly right for a world where height was the best armor. You scribble a note in the corner. We all walk funny when we grow too fast. Night falls. The sounds shift. No more raptors tonight. Just wind insects and the distant sound of something heavy trying to figure out how to walk faster than a tree grows. You roll up in your bedroll and whisper to the stars, "You're trying your best, buddy." You're not sure if you're talking to the dinosaur or yourself. Morning comes with the smell of wet bark and fern sap. The light is thin, dusted with pollen and humidity, and something above you is rustling, a sound like silk being dragged across a roof. You squint up and nearly fall backward. The sauropod is already awake. Its neck arches skyward and it's feeding. But not just nibbling. No, this is an operation. You're watching the reason this creature evolved the way it did. Up where the food is, 30 feet above the ground, maybe more, the dinosaur is stripping canopy leaves with slow, deliberate bites. You see the treetops shake, whole branches vanish into its mouth like spaghetti. A moment later, it exhales with the faint sound of a lawnmower choking on weeds. Everything about this animal is tuned for one job: eating what others can't reach. You climb a rise to get a better view. From above, the feeding pattern becomes clear. These dinosaurs move like slow-moving satellites, orbiting around each tree, harvesting in spirals before lurching to the next. The leaves up high are untouched by smaller grazers, fresher, richer in nutrients. Up here, they don't have to fight. Just reach and eat. Meanwhile, on the forest floor below, the struggle is real. A mob of smaller herbivores, you think they might be dryosaurids, scrambles around like hungry ducks at a park. They pick through what falls: half-chewed leaves, stems, bark shreds. Occasionally, a sauropod shakes a tree and everyone gets excited, like kids catching candy from a piñata. And this is the strategy. Be so tall that no one competes with you. Leave scraps behind and let everyone else argue over the leftovers. It's efficient, if a little smug. You watch one sauropod ignore a perfectly decent clump of mid-level foliage just to bend its neck further higher into the treetop like a snob in a salad bar. But there's a risk. Reaching that high means stretching blood vessels, balancing mass, and supporting a neck that might weigh as much as a school bus. Scientists still debate whether these sauropods had specialized hearts, maybe even multiple chambers or accessory pumps to keep blood flowing to the brain. Because if not, lifting their head too fast could have meant passing out mid-bite. A fainting giraffe lizard. Now that's a mental image. Still, it works. One neck sweeps toward you close enough that you smell its breath. It's not terrible, honestly. Kind of like old spinach in morning fog. You step aside as it moves past, munching, continuously, eyes half closed. This thing is Zen incarnate. A juvenile watches it from below and tries to mimic the motion. Its neck only reaches halfway, but it stretches with such conviction that you almost applaud. It snags a low-hanging branch, chews it with exaggerated seriousness, and gives a tiny head toss like it just conquered Everest. You can't help but laugh, quietly. The feeding continues into midday. The herd moves slowly, always toward denser growth. You spot some odd behavior. A sauropod stops, sniffs the air, then moves to a tree it had passed earlier. Apparently, they can detect chemical signals in plants. Trees under attack often release tannins, making themselves bitter. So these dinosaurs may have learned to read the air. Find the tastiest, least offended meal. Not just tall, but tactical. Suddenly, the peace breaks. A branch snaps loud, unnatural. You spin, expecting danger. But no, just a smaller dinosaur leaping awkwardly into a shrub, possibly chased by its sibling. You sigh, false alarm. But the herd reacts anyway. Not with panic, just repositioning. They shift, form a loose semicircle. Heads turn outward, tails inward. It's a passive formation, but clearly practiced. A few adults keep feeding even during the maneuver, like they have done this 1,000 times. You realize how social they must be. Not mindless wanderers, but cooperative feeders. Mutual lookout. Built-in brunch club. You sit on a flat rock, sketching again. One sauropod scratches its flank on a rough-barked tree, swaying side to side like a cat against a couch. Its weight nearly topples the trunk. A few birds scatter from the canopy, screeching their complaints. You're not the only one annoyed by tree shaking. Then you notice something odd. One of the sauropods doesn't reach for the highest leaves. It stays mid-level, cropping branches just above your head height. At first, you think maybe it's injured, but then it lowers its head, drops a mouthful of greens, and nudges them toward a juvenile. Feeding. Purposefully. You feel something tighten in your chest. The idea of parental care in sauropods is still debated. Some say they abandoned their young. Others point to trackways where adults and juveniles walk together. Maybe it wasn't universal. Maybe some species stuck around forming these gentle caravans of giants guiding the young until they could reach the trees on their own. Either way, you're watching something ancient and weirdly familiar parenting in a world that shouldn't have had room for it. The day softens, shadows stretch. The sauropods settle around a cluster of trees stripped clean on one side. You lie on your back using your pack as a pillow. Overhead, a giant leg lifts and falls again meters away. No hurry, no fear. You fall asleep to the rhythm of chewing. And when you dream of high leaves, long necks, and a world where height really was might. You wake up to the sound of splashing, not the playful kind, but the slow, reluctant kind. Something is trying to drink and failing to make it look dignified. You rise from your spot, wiping dew from your arms, and there it is. The sauropod stands at the edge of a shallow stream, legs splayed like a marionette that lost its balance. Its front limbs, normally elegant in their giraffe strut, are now awkwardly spread apart. The back legs do their best to accommodate, but they're just along for the ride. Its chest lowers, neck folding, like a construction crane attempting yoga, and finally, its lips reach the water. This is not a graceful act. Imagine a skyscraper trying to sip from a puddle. There's lurching. There's groaning. At one point, the entire thing trembles slightly, and you find yourself instinctively bracing for a fall. But no, it steadies. It drinks. And this is survival. Because when you're built like a tower, even the simplest acts, drinking, lying down, turning in place, require an architectural blueprint. You kneel closer, watching its jaw ripple as it gulps. Water foams at the edges of its mouth. A few fish scatter. A frog, apparently fed up with everything, leaps from a lily pad onto your boot and sits there like a judgmental bystander. You ignore it. So why didn't this creature evolve shorter front legs or a different feeding posture or, I don't know, a straw? Paleontologists still debate whether this sauropod's design was a trade-off, brilliant for browsing but terrible for bending. Some propose that they preferred marshy banks, where they could slope into the water rather than crouch. Others suggest they avoided drinking altogether for long stretches, absorbing moisture from plants instead. Kind of like prehistoric camels with extremely bad posture. You watch as it finishes and begins the reverse process. Neck rises first in a wavy, cautious motion. Then the chest lifts. The legs scramble inward again, clumsy and slow. You swear you hear one joint pop. It winces, or maybe you do. Once standing, it gives a quick shake. Drops of water glimmer in the sun as they fling from its face, raining down on everything nearby. You included. The others wait their turn. They're less dramatic, but no more efficient. Drinking becomes a shared ordeal, a choreographed performance of bending and hoping gravity doesn't win. A smaller juvenile tries a shortcut, just walking into the stream up to its belly and dunking its whole head. Effective, if not exactly dignified. You take a moment to glance upstream. The water's clean, flowing from high-ground glacial melt, if you had to guess. This stream wouldn't last all year. These dinosaurs probably had to migrate with water access and mind-plotting routes, not just by food, but by drinkable stops. That adds a layer of urgency to their slow rhythm. They're not just wandering, they're navigating a world with strict hydration deadlines. By midday, the drinking's done. The herd moves again. You watch one of them step over a fallen log, front legs lifting high to clear it, while the back ones shuffle like they're apologizing. That gait, it's more noticeable after the awkward drinking display. It almost looks like the front is trying to lead a parade, while the back half is muttering, "Wait up, I've got tiny legs." At one point, one adult pauses beside a large rock flat, sun-warmed, and lowers itself just slightly to rub its flank against it. A long scratch, probably itchy from insects or plant resin. But here's the fun part. It angles the movement carefully, using the front legs to shift height, while the back legs adjust like a seesaw. You realize these animals have to engineer every casual action. You walk beside one for an hour, measuring the way it selects footing. Its front limbs test ground firmness before stepping. It avoids muddy patches, stepping only where smaller animals have crossed. You're watching not instinct, but learned behavior, memory, experience, maybe even the dinosaur version of a bad knee. Off-topic fact of this day. Termites here are prehistoric and their mounds sometimes outlast the creatures that built them. You spot one such mound weathered and hollowed older than the fossil bones you tripped over yesterday. Civilization just smaller. You break from the herd to climb a ridge and get a better view of the land ahead. The valley below is speckled with oxbow lakes half-dried. Cracks web the mud like a dried-out painting. Trees cluster around the water, and the only path forward narrows between two cliffs. If they want to pass, they'll have to drink now or risk nothing later. You sit and wonder, did these dinosaurs plan? Could they anticipate water scarcity? Or were they like living wind-up toys, reacting, not thinking? The evidence doesn't shout either way, but it whispers. Coordinated herding, memory of drinking spots, communal care. It doesn't take a PhD to see something more than instinct at work. As the sun dips, you watch them settle near a pond. One drinks again, this time while standing in deeper water, more stable footing. The sunset casts long shadows, turning their necks into living bridges between earth and sky. You pull out your canteen and take a sip. It feels ridiculously easy. And for a moment, you envy the ridiculous struggle of something that never takes water for granted. The first sound you hear is the chirp not from a bird, but from something very, very young. A tiny, reedy squeak like a whistle made of leaves. You follow it, half expecting to find some squabbling tree lizard or early mammal rustling in the scrub. But then you see the shadow longer than your tent wobbling side to side like a drunken crane. And there it is. A baby sauropod. But let's be honest, it's only a baby by name. This thing is already the size of a minivan, and it can barely walk in a straight line. Its front legs, like its parents, are longer than the back, giving it the appearance of a toddler dressed in grown-up stilts. You crouch low and watch as it wobbles toward a stand of soft fronds. Its mouth finds a cluster, and it tries to bite but misses entirely. A second attempt lands true, but instead of chewing, it stands there frozen like it forgot the next step. You resist the urge to clap or cry. It's trying really hard. And out of the trees she arrives. The mother, or an older female sauropod family. Structures are still up for debate. What's clear is that she's watching. Carefully, not just in passing. She moves between the trees like a lighthouse, slow, deliberate, tall enough that every branch sways at her passing. You swear the baby brightens, making another gleeful chirp and stumbling to meet her. She doesn't nuzzle it. This isn't a Hallmark moment. But she stands near, shifts her massive body just enough to cast a shadow over the little one. And then she lowers her head half a meter away and drops a clump of semi-chewed leaves at its feet. Parenting Ancient Edition. Scientists argue whether sauropods raised their young or left them in nesting colonies. Some fossilized trackways suggest mixed-age herds. Others show juveniles far from adults. It's not a settled question, but here now there's no question. This youngling is being watched, fed, shielded, and probably judged a little because, wow, it just tripped over its own tail. You watch the little one totter across the clearing. Its tail sways like a misbehaving ribbon. It tries to mimic the adult gait, front legs then back. But the proportions aren't quite there yet, and its legs are all different lengths. It looks like a clumsy coffee table with a neck. Still, there's something incredible about it. This creature was born into height, into imbalance, into weirdness, and it's already making it work. Another adult joins, then another. Soon there are 3 towering figures around the juvenile, forming a loose triangle. You can feel the space change. It's protective but not paranoid. You get the sense they've done this before, many times. This isn't just parenting, it's mentorship by committee. One of them steps forward and lowers its neck. A gentle nudge sends the juvenile stumbling toward a different patch of low vegetation. It's a reroute, like saying, no, eat this, not that. A lesson, not a reprimand. Then comes a sound you don't expect. The baby squeals, not in fear, in frustration. It wanted the bitter leaves, not the sweet ones. Drama. One adult huffs through its nostrils. Another nudges the juvenile, again gently but firmly. You watch this baby dinosaur throw the prehistoric equivalent of a tantrum, flopping onto its belly with a loud thud. Its legs flail once, then it just lies there. You stifle a laugh. Because, of course, the only dinosaur that walks like a giraffe also gives birth to toddlers that act like overcooked noodles. But parenting's hard when your child is visible from orbit. This thing can't hide, can't duck behind a bush, can't even lie down without announcing its position to every predator within a mile. Being a baby sauropod is like being born as a neon billboard. That's probably why they travel with guards. You spot an adult whose back is scarred, long slashes down its flank, healed over but deep. A survivor. It lingers at the edge of the group, always watching the trees. Not feeding, not resting, watching. You wonder if it remembers something the others don't. A failed ambush, a missing calf. Memory's a funny thing. Animals have more of it than we often admit. Later, you follow the juvenile as it regains its energy. It starts practicing tail swings, short and fast. It turns in circles, chasing its own end like a dog that doesn't know it has a tail until it smacks itself with it. Oddly, its tail is soft. Too soft. More of a flag than a whip. Paleontologists believe sauropods only harden their tail tips with age, like installing a flail one vertebra at a time. You imagine this little one discovering its tail's power someday. Right now, though, it can't even use it for balance. The sun climbs higher, the herd starts moving again slow and deliberate with the juvenile struggling to keep pace. Every few meters it pauses to breathe, then dashes forward in bursts, trying to stay within the protective triangle of adults. You keep your distance but can't look away. Because in this creature's stumbling steps you see the world's most impossible childhood. Born tall, born loud, born exposed, and somehow still loved. There's a rustle behind you too sharp to be winded, too heavy to be a bird. You duck brush aside a low branch and peek through the foliage. It's not danger, not quite. It's a tail, long segmented and at first glance absolutely built for business. You expect it to crack the air like a bullwhip, maybe even snap a predator's jaw from 10 meters out. But no. This one doesn't lash. It droops. It sways. It wobbles, actually. Kind of like it's drunk or trying to remember how to be a tail. You inch closer. The sauropod's tail is dragging slightly as it walks, the tip occasionally bouncing off tree roots. That surprises you. Weren't sauropods supposed to have whip-like tails? Some even thought they could break the sound barrier with them. A living sonic boom. But this one? This is less Indiana Jones and more lazy kite in low wind. Paleontologists still debate how these tails functioned. Some believe the whip theory applies only to specific sauropods like Diplodocus or Apatosaurus. Others argue that these tails were more for counterbalance display or temperature regulation. For this giraffe-legged oddball, the answer might be all or none of the above. You crouch beside a fossilized log and sketch its silhouette. The tail tapers slowly with no bony club or spiny flourish. You wonder, was it just decorative leftover from evolution's older drafts? The juvenile you saw earlier is practicing again. This time it raises its tail high and wiggles it dramatically. Then it pauses, looking over its shoulder like, "Did that do anything? Did I win?" You want to tell it good effort, buddy, but you don't want to get stomped. Nearby, one of the adults lifts its tail slightly as it passes over a bush. A low branch catches the tip and stays caught. For about 3 steps, the tail walks with a stick poking from it like an absurd costume. Eventually it shakes loose, but not before two small theropods in the distance tilt their heads clearly confused. You grin. A dinosaur tail terrifying majestic and sometimes just a dumb stick magnet. The terrain changes. You follow the herd into a narrow forest corridor where the canopy filters sunlight into golden bars. Here, the tail becomes more expressive, less floppy. It rises when they climb a slope. It stiffens when they cross a rocky patch. It sways wide when they turn. Not for defense, more like balance, like a tightrope walker's pole. There's an odd moment where one sauropod halts and swings its tail sideways to scratch its own flank. The move is slow and imprecise, but it gets the job done. It's not often you see a 30-ton animal using its own body like a back scratcher. Off-topic fact time. You once read that modern crocodiles can use their tails to herd fish into tight corners. Not because they think it through, but because it works. So who knows? Maybe this sauropod tail has tricks too. Or maybe it's just glorified luggage. A little later, something small and fast darts through the underbrush, a blur of scales and panic. One adult sauropod reacts instantly. Its tail lifts and sways behind it like a warning sign. Not a whip, a signal. The rest of the herd slows, repositions. It doesn't lash out, doesn't strike, just makes itself known. That's the power of size, the luxury of not needing violence. You imagine a predator watching this. Tail lifted, legs braced. No thrashing, just presence. A whisper that says, "Try me, I dare you." You step into the clearing behind them and finally get a full view of a resting sauropod. Its tail is coiled in a lazy arc behind it like a very slow letter S. You're close enough now to see the skin thick textured, slightly cracked like dry river mud. In some places it's discolored, maybe scarring, maybe ancient parasite damage. The tail isn't pristine. It's lived in. You hear a snap. The juvenile again. It's practicing, bless its heart. It tries to whip the air with its tail and ends up spinning itself in a half circle like a malfunctioning Roomba. One of the adults exhales sharply. A sigh, a chuckle. The baby flops to the ground and groans. Same little guy, same. As twilight settles in, you follow the silhouettes once more. The tails swish in rhythm with the legs, not as weapons, not as ornaments, but as punctuation, soft commas behind each step. You sit on a mossy stone, your back to the wind, and realize something simple: not everything in prehistory had to be deadly. Sometimes evolution builds softness. Sometimes it builds leftovers. Sometimes it builds tales that never cracked the air, but still told stories in every sway. And maybe that's enough. It's the kind of morning that feels like the world just forgot to wake up. Thick mist rolls low across the valley floor, turning the horizon into a smudge. You follow the sauropod herd. Into it, boots sinking into soft earth, and that's when it happens. One step, then another, and then a long wet slurp. The ground opens up like an old memory and swallows half a foot. Not yours, theirs. The largest sauropod in the group, maybe the matriarch or maybe just the most unlucky, has stepped into a patch of mud too soft to hold its weight. The front limb sinks down with a noise that sounds exactly like someone dropping a couch into oatmeal. It tries to pull back. Instead, its rear leg slips forward. It doesn't fall yet, but it lurches forward with a low moan, a sound so deep you feel it in your teeth. It's stuck. And now so are you. The entire herd pauses. The younger ones shift nervous. One gives a snort like a question. The air goes still. You back away a step, then another. But the mud isn't done with you either. Your own boot squelches into something more like pudding than soil, and before you can shout, your foot's underwater. Cold and slow, the mud grips your ankle with all the ambition of a small, clingy god. Above, the sauropod struggles again. The long front legs brace on firmer ground, while the rear legs kick backward, pushing mud like a stuck forklift. The ground shifts. Water bubbles up around its belly. it's going to fall. And if it does, that tail could flatten a tree or you. You dig your other foot in leaning away. Don't panic. That's rule number 1. Or maybe it's rule number 3 after, don't follow dinosaurs into marshes. The herd begins to circle, making wide, heavy arcs around the sinking member. Not to help, not quite, just to observe, to wait. This is how they survive, not by rescue, but by pattern. If the stuck one gets out, great. If not, well, fewer mouths to feed. But this one isn't giving up. With a grunt that sends a cloud of steam into the air, it angles its body sideways and uses its massive front limbs like levers. The giraffe walk works in reverse now. Long front legs lifting, twisting, pressing into the drier edge of the delta. You watch mud pour off its flank in thick sheets. Its chest heaves. One back leg finds purchase, then another. With a final lunging groan, it hauls itself forward, half rolling, half pushing, landing with a colossal splat on firmer ground. You cheer softly, because what else do you do when a miracle drags itself out of the earth? Your own escape is less graceful. You twist your ankle, say a few choice words into your sleeve, but eventually you crawl out and sit in the grass, panting and watching the dinosaur rise again, mud-coated and glorious. Paleontologists have found fossil sites like this, bone beds, in ancient deltas where dozens of sauropods perished. It wasn't always predators that ended them. Sometimes it was just the ground giving up. Entire herds bogged down during seasonal crossings, their bones left tangled in old silt. They called some of these places dinosaur traps, but really it was just bad luck with bad footing. You limp behind the herd as it continues. Slower now. The mud seems to have shaken them even if they pretend otherwise. The juveniles stick closer to the center. You notice 2 smaller adults flanking the group, keeping an eye on the trail ahead. It's subtle, but it's there. Maybe trauma rewires behavior even for giants. As the day warms, dragonflies drift above the grasses, catching the light on their stained glass wings. You spot a turtle, ancient and squat, half buried in silt. It blinks once, unbothered by your presence. Everything here has adapted to shifting ground, to slippery seasons, and rivers that change their minds overnight. You think back to the sauropod stuck in the mud. Its height had failed it. Its strength nearly doomed it. But the same tools, those towering legs, that long reach, ultimately got it out. That's the irony of the giraffe walk. Built for elegance, helpless in softness, magnificent when upright, clumsy when caught. No emergency protocol, just try not to fall. You remember something from your reading. Some researchers suggest sauropods may have avoided floodplains during certain times of the year, migrated up to firmer ground. Did they know the danger? Or did enough of them sink for the others to remember? Historians still debate whether sauropods had seasonal awareness or just followed food. Some tracks suggest migration. Others point to year-round nesting. It's hard to say. But you look at the one who escaped the mud, and you see wisdom in every tired movement. This is a creature who knows where not to step. The herd crosses a shallow stream, picking careful paths across the stone bed. You follow at a distance, your boots still squishing, but your spirits lifted. Survival looks awkward sometimes. Looks slow, looks heavy and dumb, and covered in pond scum. But here's the thing, it works. You find a high spot to camp. From above, the muddy path looks like a scar in the valley floor. The herd disappears into the far tree-lined tails, swaying like banners of some forgotten kingdom. And you whisper to the dusk, "Next time I'm bringing a canoe." You're sitting on a ridge of warm rock, the kind that holds onto sunlight long after the air has cooled, and you notice something strange. The sauropod, one of the younger adults, is watching you. Not aggressively, not nervously, just watching. Its head is turned ever so slightly, not directly at you, but just off to the side. One of its eyes, big and glossy, like a dark marble soaked in oil, catches the reflection of the afternoon sun. It's not blinking, not even moving much, but you feel it. And that's when it hits you. This thing sees weird. Like really weird. You remember reading something about this? How sauropods, due to the position of their eyes on the sides of their heads, didn't see the world the way predators did? No binocular vision, no focused depth. Instead, an almost panoramic view great for spotting threats from the flanks, but terrible for judging the distance to something directly in front of them. It explains the gaze, the half-head tilt, the way they seem to look past you, not at you. Paleontologists still debate just how sauropods use their vision. Some argue they had overlapping visual fields toward the back which would let them detect movement behind them better than in front. A dinosaur with rear-view mirrors. Because when your head is 15 feet from your brain and your tail is longer than a bus, you better have an eye on traffic in all directions. The one staring at you blinks slowly. Then with the same dispassionate grace as before, it turns away. You almost feel insulted. You follow the herd as they descend into a gully, the shadows deepening. You notice how each sauropod shifts its head side to side as it walks not just to browse but to scan. One swings its neck low, eyes sweeping the undergrowth like a radar dish. Another lifts its head skyward for several minutes, peering at a stand of tall trees with half-lidded suspicion. Then you spot something peculiar. An adult stops abruptly. Its head tilts right, then left. It backs up a step, an odd move for something this big, and raises its tail slightly. Another sauropod copies it. Then a third. The juvenile freezes. You squint, trying to see what they're reacting to. Nothing. No movement, no noise. But something's off. Something only they saw or sensed. Then a shadow moves between trees. Small. Probably harmless, but not unknown. Maybe it was just another scavenger, or something slinking by hoping for leftovers. The sauropods begin to shift again, returning to their path, but you realize they weren't panicking. They were checking. Their vision lateral, scattered panoramic let them catch movement from impossible angles. They didn't need to look straight ahead, they barely ever did. You test this out yourself. You mimic the way they move their heads' eyes, scanning from the side, not the front. It's disorienting. You lose your footing. Step in a patch of thorns. Great. Clearly, evolution didn't make you for this. But for them, it's perfect. They're not built to focus on one thing. They're built to notice everything. At one point, you spot two sauropods pausing beside a stream. They lower their heads and look not at each other, but past one another. Their eyes align just outside their shared field of view, like synchronized sensors. It's eerie, beautiful, efficient. You sit nearby and take notes, and that's when you notice something even weirder. One of them is watching you again. From behind, you hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, but somehow its eye side-mounted small and motionless has caught your outline from the rear. It shifts its weight slightly, not alarmed, just aware. You realize something important: you can never sneak up on this thing. Not really. And that's probably what saved them, at least from surprise. Their size protected their bodies, but their eyes protected their time. Back at camp, you sketch a diagram of their field of vision. Two wide cones stretching from either side, barely overlapping. It looks like wings, a visual span that might have reached nearly 300 degrees. Compare that to humans, poor little 210-degree creatures constantly missing what's behind us. These giants didn't just tower over the world, they watched it differently. Off topic but related, you once read that some pigeons have a 340-degree visual field. So technically, yes, these sauropods were just colossal herbivorous reptilian pigeons with necks that could knock over a lamppost. As twilight creeps in, you lie back on the grass. The herd settles near a rocky bluff, their heads swiveling like weather vanes. You watch the stars start to prick the sky and wonder, could they see those too? Probably not. Not clearly. But it's comforting to think about that a creature so massive, so strange, still bothered to look backward as often as it looked forward, just in case something was coming. The sky is bruised purple by the time you reach the high trees. Not the tall trees, the high ones. Trees so old and stretched that their trunks taper into the mist like cathedral spires. You squint upward and lose them halfway to the stars. Somewhere up there, birds scream at nothing and then vanish again. The forest here is quiet in the same way libraries are tense with rules and full of secrets. The sauropods are slowing down. Not grazing, not drinking, just waiting. You glance at the sky. The first roll of thunder doesn't come from above. It comes from behind. A cold wind slinks through the trunks and the leaves above begin to hiss. Not rattle, not rustle, but hiss like they're whispering secrets in a language older than humans. You zip your jacket. Too late. You're already cold. A juvenile squeaks. Another stomps nervously. Storm season has arrived. You expected panic, but you're the only one losing composure. The sauropods do something odd. They move closer to each other. Yes, but more strangely to the trees. The tallest trees. You'd think they'd avoid them, wouldn't you? Lightning rods rooted in the earth practically begging to be struck. But no, they huddle beneath them as if these ancient trunks are old friends. Shelter, not risk. Historians still debate whether sauropods understood storms, whether they sensed the pressure, dropped the static, charge the early rumble of danger. Some theories suggest their long necks could act like lightning attractors. Others think their size gave them a sense of invincibility. Or perhaps they just like to feel small under something taller. The wind howls now pushing through the treetops with a sound like torn paper. The sauropods raise their heads in unison, necks tilting slightly toward the sound. It's eerie, like watching a group of weather vanes decide to prey. You crouch beneath a twisted pine pack pulled tight and watch as the first sheet of rain falls, not drops but blades, sharp and fast, slicing through the air and soaking everything in seconds. The juvenile lets out a distressed bleat and presses into the flank of the nearest adult. Then comes the light, not the calm flicker of distant flashes. No, this is immediate, blinding. A bolt crashes into a tree just 30 feet from you, and in that split second the world becomes all white edges and impossible silence. Then crack. The sound arrives late, like it had to catch up, and it tears through your chest like a punch. You gasp, shaking. These sauropods, they barely flinch. A few shift their weight. One lifts its foot and sets it back down. But mostly they stand, still and towering. Their bodies wet and steaming glisten in the electric light. This is not their first storm. They've done this before many times. You watch them arrange themselves in a loose spiral, their long necks overlapping slightly. Their tails turned outward like defensive barricades. The young ones tuck between legs and trees. The largest of them plants her feet, braces against the gust, and lowers her head, not in fear, but to listen. Another flash, another boom. The smell of ozone bark and steam fills the air. You realize something: they're not avoiding the storm. They're leaning into it. Maybe that's the point. You don't run from every storm. You make yourself wide and tall and impossible to ignore and let it pass over you. You take a few steps forward, wanting to get closer, and almost slip on the slick rock beneath your feet. The ground here isn't soil, it's fossil. A massive slab of ancient stone worn smooth by centuries of rain. You pause. Look closer. There under your boot, faint, worn impressions. Tracks. Massive toe-splayed footprints from another herd, another age. These trees have seen sauropods before. Hundreds, maybe thousands. This spot has always been a sanctuary. You wipe your lens and take a picture. The rain tries to get in your camera like it wants to erase the moment. You snap the shutter anyway. A bolt hits another tree farther this time. The sauropods don't even blink. The juvenile steps into the clearing for a moment, lifts its head, and lets the rain pour directly into its open mouth. You want to laugh, but something in the moment catches your throat. It's joy, or maybe defiance. Off-topic fact: in some cultures, elephants stand perfectly still in thunderstorms. They don't fear lightning. Some even raise their trunks to the sky. Ritual instinct. No one knows. You wonder if the sauropods felt something similar, a connection to the violence above. Not fear, just recognition. Eventually, the worst passes. The thunder fades into a distant grumble, the lightning becomes less urgent, and the rain settles into a rhythm soft, warm, patient. The herd begins to move again. They don't run, don't chatter. They simply exist, steam rising off their backs, mud clinging to their ankles like nothing happened at all. You follow them as the forest exhales. Water drips from every surface. Leaves glisten. The sky is still gray but softer now, like a bruise fading from a healed wound. You look back at the trees. They're scorched in places, one still smokes, but they're standing. And so are you. The air is thinner here. Drier too. You're walking along the ridge of what was once a shallow inland sea, long since turned to stone, its floor cracked and scabbed with fossil-rich sediment. The trees are sparse, the ground littered with shale. The sauropods are long gone, moved on to greener patches. But here there's something else. A dig site. A single canopy tent flaps lazily in the breeze. Tarps are pinned down with stones. Brushes, chisels, and labeled flags are strewn like the remains of a very polite battle. You creep closer, boots crunching gravel, and there it is, partially exposed in the earth, still curled in stone like a secret it never wanted to tell. A vertebra, and then another, then a femur the length of a kitchen counter. They didn't find a full skeleton. No one ever does, just fragments. Pieces of a puzzle that no one's seen the cover art for. But they're distinctive, unmistakable. The long neural spines, the asymmetrical joint surfaces, the weird curvature of the front limb sockets. This, the scientists mostly agree, is the giraffe walker. And it makes no sense. That's what draws you in. The mystery, the question still hanging in the dust. They found it in a formation where no other sauropods of its kind should be. The strata are older than expected, the surrounding fossils out of sync with its presumed timeline. For years, some paleontologists claimed it was a mix-up. Misidentification. A chimera fossil bones from two or more creatures jumbled together in the sediment. Others insisted no. This was real, just rare. Maybe a side branch of evolution, a strange cousin that never went mainstream. And here under this brittle sun, the argument plays out in fragments and field notes. You kneel next to a plastered bone jacket, something large and long. A scapula, probably, still not lifted from the ground, still waiting for someone to have the budget to finish the job. There's a sign nailed to a fence post nearby. Weather-beaten. Faded. It reads, Xenotitan sp. Indeterminate sauropod caution, unstable ground. That question mark after sep, that's everything. Paleontologists still debate whether this species deserves its own name at all. Maybe it's just a weird variation of an already named dinosaur. Maybe it's juvenile. Maybe it's deformed. Evolution isn't clean and fossilization sure isn't either. You run your fingers over a bone still embedded in matrix. It's been cleaned to a shine, glinting softly in the dying light. You think of the creature it belonged to stumbling through storms, dragging awkward limbs over muddy deltas, stretching that long neck into a hostile sky. It lived, it walked, it left this behind. But that's all you get. A single fossil. 100 questions. Off-topic fact. One time, scientists mistook a turtle's shell for a dinosaur's pelvis. For 2 decades. Paleontology is less about answers and more about stacking guesses until they start to resemble the truth. You hear footsteps, not yours. A researcher, dusty, sunburned, tired, appears over the ridge, nods politely, and joins you by the trench. You exchange no words, just stand there looking at bones. Finally, she sighs and mutters, "We don't even know how it laid down." You smile. No one does you reply. That's the charm. She smirks, offers a thermos of lukewarm coffee, and leaves you to your thoughts. You stare at the bones a little longer. The shapes are familiar now. That front-to-back imbalance. The way the vertebrae rise higher than they should. Like a memory trapped in stone. One day, someone will write a paper. They'll give it a new name, or erase the old one. Declare the mystery solved. But not today. Today, it's still a ghost. A rumor in the rock. A creature too awkward to have existed and too stubborn to be forgotten. You pick up a field notebook left under a weight. It's open to a page with a sketch. Crude but recognizable, a sauropod with one comically long front leg and a tiny annoyed expression on its face. Someone's attempt at humor. You laugh out loud. You turn the page. Another drawing. This one's better. A full skeleton reconstruction labeled with notes like limb articulation here and why so tall circled 3 times in red ink. You whisper, same question, friend. Same. You leave the notebook where you found it, pull your coat tighter, and walk the perimeter one last time. The wind rises, the tent flaps, and below your feet, the earth keeps holding secrets. You're back in the lowlands following a dirt trail cut between weathered cliffs when a thought you can't shake finally surfaces. What if it wasn't even real? The giraffe walker, you mean? That bizarre sauropod with the long front legs, the strange stance, the tail that flopped more than it whipped. What if all of it was just a misread? It's not as wild as it sounds. Paleontologists still debate whether this species should have ever been named. The fossil record is sketchy at best. One femur here, a suspiciously long humerus there, a partial vertebral column found a continent away. Enough to imagine a beast, not enough to prove one. You find yourself seated beside a campfire high on a ledge, watching the horizon fade into dark. Behind you, the wind plays with your notes, diagrams, sketches, half-finished reconstructions in pencil and hope. You remember what one researcher said in a documentary years ago, back when you were just an armchair dino fan? Sometimes we're building monsters out of broken furniture. He was talking about composite fossils, accidental hybrids, bones from different species buried together by flood or landslide mistaken for a single animal. And it's happened before. There's the famous case of Ultrasaurus, a giant discovered in Korea, pieced together from bones that didn't belong to the same creature. For years, people imagined a titan that never existed. Even gave it a name. Even printed it on t-shirts. Until they didn't. You sip from your canteen and stare into the fire. Could the giraffe walker be the same trick of geology and optimism? An overreach. After all, why would evolution stretch the front legs like that? Why risk so much imbalance? Why create an animal that looks like it tripped mid-design and never recovered? One theory says it's a juvenile of an already known species. Another claims it's sexual dimorphism. Maybe only the males had that giraffe gait showing off to impress the ladies like a prehistoric catwalk model. Others think it's geographic variation. A population that adapted to different terrain, higher vegetation, or cooler climates. But none of those theories stick, because the bones don't fit cleanly anywhere else. You've seen the casts, you've walked the dig sites, you follow the logic like breadcrumbs through time. And the more you study, the more the answer twists out of reach. That's the thing about fossils, they don't tell you what happened. They whisper, they hint, they're passive-aggressive riddles pressed into stone. Off-topic example, one researcher once mistook fossilized dinosaur droppings for fossilized eggs. Whole paper. Peer-reviewed. Took years to correct. So yeah, mistakes happen. You unroll one of your sketches and stare at the silhouette. Long front legs. Neck held high. Tail dragging low. A creature out of balance but still majestic. You think about the animal you saw or believed you saw. That fluid gait, that cautious elegance, the way it bent to drink, flailed in the mud, watched you from behind without ever turning its head. A ghost, maybe, or something older than memory. You don't want it to be fake, but you know science doesn't care what you want. Suddenly, wind hits your back, lifting ash from the fire. Sparks spiral upward and you get this strange sensation like something tall is watching. Not from fear, just from presence. You turn. Nothing. Just the cliff edge. A few broken trees. A ridge of sediment so old it remembers nothing warm. And yet, you could have sworn something just moved. You let out a slow breath. You're tired. That's all. Maybe you need a rest. Maybe you need to stop chasing myths in the shape of bones. But you can't. Because even if it was a mistake, even if no creature ever walked exactly like that, what if the idea matters more than the proof? What if imagination in the end is the fossil that lives longest? You stare back at the sketch. You imagine it moving. Still weird, still wonderful, still walking. You didn't expect to find bones this far inland. Not this kind. You're miles from the coast, standing in a dry basin where nothing grows taller than your knee. The dirt here is red, baked into layers by heat and centuries. Wind scrapes along the rocks in lazy spirals. You wipe sweat from your neck, turn your collar up, and wonder if you're lost. And then you see it, a curve of fossil embedded in stone. A piece of rib, long-arched, unmistakably sauropod. You kneel, trace the edge with your fingers. A few meters away, a chunk of vertebra, another femur, more than one skeleton scattered across an area the size of a small village. Most are incomplete, disarticulated, but some aren't. You stare at a nearly intact front limb. Humerus ulna metacarpals, and they're long. Too long. Giraffe long. This far from the coast. From floodplains, from the kinds of swampy feeding grounds this species supposedly preferred. It doesn't make sense. Paleontologists still debate how some sauropods got so far inland. Were they seasonal migrators? Victims of sudden drought? Did flash floods push their bodies out here after death, leaving them to dry and calcify under a sun they never knew? Or did they live here, thrive here? The evidence doesn't decide. It never does. You set up your camp near the largest rib cage using one of the old dig markers to tie off your tarp. Whoever came before you left quietly. No signs of recent work. Just a few tags, weathered notes, and an old canvas bag with a trowel and a pack of gum that expired 30 years ago. You chew a piece anyway, still minty. From a high ridge you survey the land. The skeletons seem to cluster around what would have been an ancient river bend. It's dry now, nothing but a line of cracked silt and wind-blown reeds. But in the dinosaurs' day, this was likely lush, green, possibly bursting with ferns, cycades, and conifers. You pull out your sketch pad and begin plotting the bones. 3 individuals at least. 2 adults, 1 juvenile. All facing the same direction. Legs curled underneath, necks turned westward. They didn't die in chaos. No signs of struggle, no claw marks, no scattering of parts, just collapse. Like they sat down and never stood back up. You sit back breathing slowly. These creatures may have migrated hundreds of miles between food and water sources. Their long front limbs made them perfect for reaching high vegetation, but less than ideal for long-distance travel on uneven terrain. And yet here they are. Proof they went far beyond their expected range. It redefines the map. Suddenly, the idea of a single biome, a single lifestyle for this species feels laughable. They weren't confined to lush, swampy, Eden-like valleys. They adapted. They wandered. Maybe they even led the way into new environments while other sauropods stayed behind. You picture a small group walking along a rocky plateau, their necks swaying above the dry brush. No shade, no puddles, just direction. Off topic, but fitting. Modern elephants have been known to remember water sources from decades ago, leading entire herds through desolate land based on memory alone. If brains that size can navigate generational knowledge, who's to say sauropods didn't do the same? The wind picks up. Dust lifts from the old riverbed and swirls around your tent. You duck inside, pulling your journal close, flipping to your older notes. You've always thought of them as coastal, as creatures that belong to mist and marsh. But now you realize that belief was built more on vibes than data. The bones here don't care what you expected. They're here. Long legs and all. Stuck in stone, waiting for someone to stop asking why here and start asking why not. You light your lantern as dusk settles, and that's when you spot it. A trackway. Faint, barely visible in the fading light, pressed into hardened silt like a whisper. Long, evenly spaced impressions. Toes splayed just slightly, front feet larger than the back. Giraffe walker. You trace the trail with your eyes. It runs along the ridge, then disappears into a layer of sandstone. Not aimless, not panicked, just walking, always walking. It starts with a smear of ochre on stone. Just a streak at first, then a curve, then lines, shapes. You run your fingers lightly along the wall of the cave, your torch casting a flickering halo across the sandstone. The pigments have faded, but the image is clear enough. A long neck, 4 legs, a tiny head, a tail that drapes like a forgotten rope. You step back, mouth dry. It's them, the giraffe walkers. You're standing in a rock shelter tucked beneath an overhang of fossilized dune, miles from the nearest bone bed, higher than the herds ever seemed to climb. And yet here on this ancient canvas is what appears to be a rendering of the creature you've followed for weeks. Your pulse skips, because the lines, rough as they are, aren't random. There's proportion, movement, intent. You're not a rock art expert, but even you can tell this wasn't decoration. This was documentation, a hunt, a memory, a warning. Historians still debate whether early humans ever saw dinosaurs. Of course, scientifically, we say they didn't. Wrong epochs, millions of years apart. But still, sometimes there are strange echoes. Myths of thunder beasts, stories of animals that shake the earth, shadows on a cave wall that shouldn't be there. And yet, here they are. Next to the sauropod is a line of smaller shapes, bipedal humanoid, maybe hunters, maybe something else. Arms raised, sticks, spears, or just awe. You sit down on a flat stone and let the silence roll over you. The air here is cool and dry, laced with the scent of dust and lichen. Your torch sputters slightly as you write in your journal. They saw something, or imagined it. Either way, it mattered enough to draw. Off-topic fact: the Sand people of southern Africa painted giraffes more than any other animal, some towering over 10 feet tall on cliff faces. Was it reverence, or was it because they simply looked like dreams on stilts? You wonder if the same impulse made someone pick up a chunk of red earth and scrawl a giraffe-legged titan onto this wall thousands of years before pigment had a name. You trace your own shadow across the floor. For a brief second, your head aligns with one of the sauropod outlines and the illusion startles you. You're part of the picture now. Could it be real? Could a dying member of the species have wandered this far, its slow steps bringing it into human memory? Or was it fossil remains that inspired the drawing? A rib unearthed by erosion, misunderstood as a god's arm or a snake's backbone. Maybe the artist never saw the animal alive but imagined it from pieces the way we do now. You rest your head back against the stone. The fire crackles once and you almost think you hear footsteps. A low vibration through the ground, but it's only your heartbeat. The shadows stretch as the sun fades beyond the rock shelf. You light a second torch and explore deeper into the cave. More images. Here a shape that looks like a nest, or maybe just a hill. Nearby, another figure with an arched back and impossibly long limbs. They're drawn in motion, always in motion. And in the final chamber, small, barely taller than you can stand, is a wall completely covered in curved lines, loops, swirls, paths. You don't know what it means, but in the middle, so faint you almost miss it, is the same creature again. This time alone, facing left, moving forward. Always, you whisper into the dark. Did you dream of them too? No reply, just the cave breathing softly around you. You sit there until the torch burns out and then you just sit in the dark. Outside, the stars return, and above you, the cave keeps its secrets. You're walking again. The herd is ahead of you, shadows against a violet horizon, their necks like moving tree trunks, their steps rhythmic and patient. The light is soft dusk shading into something even quieter. The air smells like dry moss, old rain, and sleep. One sauropod slows. You recognize it not from its markings, not from any wound or scar, but from the way it moves. The first one you followed, the giraffe walker. The original wrong-footed marvel who never seemed to rush, never seemed to doubt. Now it's lagging. Its steps aren't wrong, just heavy, more deliberate. You hear it breathe deep, long draws like it's drinking air instead of water. The rest of the herd keeps moving, unaware or unwilling to look back. You slow too. You feel like you shouldn't be watching, but also that you can't leave. It stops. In a clearing with soft ground and fading sunlight, it plants its front feet. Then the back. Then nothing. It stands there tall and perfect and ridiculous, like a cathedral wearing hiking boots. You take a few steps closer. No panic, no noise, just stillness. Then slowly it lowers its neck, not to feed, not to rest, not even to drink. It lowers with a grace that feels choreographed, like the motion was waiting inside it for years. Vertebra by vertebra, its neck folds downward. Its body begins to tilt, not awkwardly, not like the clumsy tumbles of the past. This is different, intentional, a settling. The front legs bend strange in their length, and the whole mass of the creature eases towards the earth. The rear follows, then the chest, then the tail curling like a closing question mark. It exhales, and it doesn't move again. The herd doesn't return. It doesn't call for them. There's no sound except the wind brushing through trees that were once too short for it to bother with. You sit beside it. Minutes pass, then hours. The stars rise. There is no dramatic collapse, no final gasp, just stillness, as if it decided this is far enough. You reach out and touch its side. The skin is cooling, the breath is gone, and yet somehow the presence remains. You think of all the impossible things it carried. Its strange body, its flawed design, its neck that reached where others couldn't. Its laughably inefficient drinking posture, its rear-view eyes, its hopeless gait. You think of how it walked anyway, how it moved forward even when the world didn't make room. You stay through the night. Birds sing in the morning. Small ones? The kind that weigh nothing but still echo through forests. One lands on the creature's shoulder, picks something from its hide, stays a moment, then flies away. The herd is gone. But something tells you they'll remember, the same way you will. This is how the last giraffe walker ends, not with fear, not with failure, but with rest. Slow as dusk, certain as sleep. And so you leave the clearing in silence, boots light, not turning back. Because it would have hated that. And now, as the wind curls softly through the leaves, and the world hushes itself to sleep, you find your breath sinking with the rhythm of something older than language. The giraffe walker, this creature so bizarre, so lopsided and real, fades into the folds of the earth, not as an error, but as a memory. Its bones will settle into stone. Its path will vanish beneath roots and rains. But something of it lingers. You remember the way it moved, awkward but proud. How it drank with the patience of a mountain. How its young stumbled like clumsy dancers. How its tail swayed like punctuation behind a story no one finished writing. You remember the fossils scattered far inland, the debate carved into scientific journals, the whispers of its shape on ancient cave walls. Maybe it never lived. Maybe it lived only once. Maybe it lived everywhere. But what matters here and now is that you walked beside it. You felt the weight of its presence. You followed its steps through storm and silence. You saw the way it lowered itself to the ground, not as defeat but as choice. So rest easy now. The night is gentle. The story is told. And out there in some corner of the dark, the long-legged shape of a thing that should never have stood still walks on one slow step at a time into the soft, unending echo of dreams.